Dune is a science fiction novel that defies categorization and is praised for its complicated but deeply sociological examination of human behavior. With Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 right around the corner, our eyes are on all things Dune, and today we're taking a look at one of the most central aspects of the plot. The enigmatic, psychedelic space drug, melange, is at the heart of Frank Herbert's Dune novel storyline. One of the most well-known innovations from Dune is the space narcotic mixture known as spice, but what exactly is it? Keep watching to learn all about spice. But before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What does it look like, and how is it created? We all know that the spice must flow. It's abundantly clear from all the warring factions within Dune that spice is vital for the Imperium and the Dune universe. However, do you know how it's created and what it looks like? Well, deep beneath the sands of planet Arrakis, colloquially known as Dune, the substance known as spice or melange is created when water and the fungal excretions of sandworm larvae combine. This is how it all happens. The sand trouts, which are the larvae of the sandworm, burrow deep within the soil and seek out pockets of water that are scattered throughout the vast desert terrain. Once found, by interlocking end to end, the tiny producers create barriers against little amounts of water in the soil, creating what appears to be living cisterns at the bedrock point beneath the sand. Excretions from these small producers combine with the water to produce two main byproducts: a fungal growth known as a pre-spice mass and enormous volumes of carbon dioxide. As a result of the planet's intense heat and large amounts of trapped carbon dioxide, the mixture finally erupts to the surface. This blow is explosive in nature, erupting with enough force to kill anyone in the vicinity of it, so it's definitely not a subtle or calm process. Once it erupts, the pre-spice mass is exposed to the sun, and in the intense desert heat, the pre-spice mass dries out, and it becomes the fine powdery substance known as melange. This melange then has to be harvested to be made available for use. The explosions of the pre-spice mass coming to the surface are lethal, and the material itself is dangerous, making the collection of the melange quite challenging. It is gathered by a machine known as a harvester, which also has to avoid the enormous sandworms native to the desert. This is because the worms are attracted to the rhythmic droning of the machine and attack if they feel vibrations due to the sounds created by the machine. Special aircraft known as carryalls lift the harvesters to safety once they complete their collection on the ground. However, often there are casualties, since the sandworms are extremely large and completely untamable by everyone except the Muad'Dib. The existence of sandworms makes spice collection extremely tough, making the substance even more rare. The Fremen, on the other hand, live in harmony with sandworms in the desert and have mastered the art of manually gathering spices for their own use and consumption. Hence, they are often called upon to lead or help with spice harvesting. In the very first Dune novel, Duke Leto Atreides of the ocean world Caladan is given the task by Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, who rules over the known universe, to move his family to the desert planet Arrakis and take over the reins of the production of the spice melange. The tough but prestigious responsibility of supervising the manufacturing of spices places House Atreides in a precarious situation. In addition to managing the harvest, they must also deal with the Fremen, or natives of Arrakis, who revere the spice melange. However, thanks to Paul's ability to understand the Fremen, they are actually able to develop a working relationship with them, making it easier to harvest. Coming next to the appearance of this unique drug, what spice looks like is only passingly hinted at in the novels. It is primarily described as being coppery or rust-colored powdery substance. Frank Herbert even said that in the desert, spice looked like reddish-brown mounds of sand. It is also said to have an orange-like hue in gas form, but when it appears in containers in God Emperor of Dune, it is also reported to glow radiantly blue in certain lighting. The closest thing we have to spice has to be cinnamon, which is a real-life spice that is commonly used in spice blends. Melange is said to taste and smell like cinnamon in the novels, with Lady Jessica even explicitly stating that it tastes like cinnamon. However, it is said that it tastes different every time. According to some, the spice causes an acquired flavor reaction. The flavor is perceived as enjoyable, slightly euphoric, by the body, which has learned that something is beneficial for it. Thus, it is not bitter or terrible to taste or smell. In fact, it seems like it is enjoyed by many all across the Dune universe. Further, it's often used to make things like spiced beer and other liquor, so it must taste good. What do you think?
At nightfall, the spice harvesters land.
Why is spice only found on planet Arrakis? Spice is one of the rarest goods in the cosmos because it can only be obtained on the desert planet of Arrakis. Arrakis is a desolate desert that is inhospitable due to its extreme heat and scarcity of water. Sandworms, which are tunneling monsters the size of a dozen blue whales and would devour anything they come across, make up the majority of the local fauna. We already know that these sandworms are quintessential in creating spice, and thus, simply put, these creatures are non-transportable. They are indigenous to the planet of Arrakis, and being untamable, spice production is at the mercy of their existence. Thus, spice is only found on Arrakis. It must be noted that spice is typically found in large quantities close to sandworm breeding areas. The original inhabitants of Arrakis, the Fremen, have long since perfected methods for harvesting spice in safe quantities without upsetting the megafauna below the earth. Spice is used by the Fremen in daily life, not just as a narcotic but as an ingredient. Spice is used by them to make food and various types of drinks, and it is also used to make items such as paper and other textiles, making spice very much part and parcel of life for the Fremen. Because it's so valuable, colonists from other worlds are continually looking to harvest large quantities of spice from Arrakis. As discussed, this is typically accomplished with massive mechanical combines, which can extract great amounts of spice but damage the ecology and aggravate sandworms. The fact that spice is found only on Arrakis makes it quite vulnerable to invasion, evil schemes, and plots that are all directed towards seizing the means of production. Interestingly, finding a workable substitute for this unique drug eventually became the focus of some societies, most notably the Tleilaxu, a hated race from the planet Bene Tleilax, as a result of the Imperium's monopoly on spice production. The God Emperor Leto Atreides II, Paul's son, later surpassed the Carino Empire in terms of spice control. This prompted major attempts to create the spice artificially, which eventually produced successful results for the Bene Tleilax about 1500 years after the demise of Leto II. As a result, the Tleilaxu later turned into spice traders and relied on sales to pay for many of their twisted pursuits, since they are, after all, known as the scum of the Dune universe. Even with this development, spice is only found on Arrakis since what the Bene Tleilax developed was a chemically engineered substance and not the real thing. It is said that many had tried over the years to mimic the environment of Arrakis in hopes that they would be able to replicate spice production and make it more accessible, but it has never been successful. How does spice affect an individual, and how does it turn people's eyes blue? What exactly does the spice do? Well, it's a very potent psychoactive drug that, to put it simply, increases the user's physiological powers, providing certain health benefits. The spice can lengthen one's lifespan by more than 3 times with regular use, giving some people astonishing longevity. This is important since humans have been lusting after immortality for centuries, and spice allows them, especially the uber-rich, to come very, very close to it. Due to its immense cost, only the very wealthy could frequently use the spice, but those who could afford it continued to live much beyond what was reasonable or even expected from humans. Humans that regularly consume spice also live better and not simply longer lives, as the spice has protracted health benefits that fortify the immune system. Regular spice consumption significantly improves overall health outcomes by fostering disease resistance and the capacity to heal from the majority of wounds. However, if someone is a regular user, they will develop telltale signs of spice addiction. Hardcore spice addicts can always be identified by their recognizable glowing blue eyes. The Fremen carried their blue eyes proudly since they were always surrounded by spice. It was practically in the air of Arrakis. However, nobility and other high-ranking individuals often wore contacts to hide the fact that they were addicted. Because the spice possessed narcotic effects, there was a huge and ravenous market for it, which increased the demand substantially. The more a person ingested the spice, the greater their addiction became, and without spice, many lives would be lost. Hence, spice is also shown as being incredibly addictive. Interestingly, some animals on good old Earth also produce substances that have a similar psychotropic impact on humans as spice does to the people of the Dune universe. Toads, snakes, wasps, and even scorpions are known to produce toxins or venoms which can cause both hallucinations and also death. So be careful what you wish for. The use of spice also provides additional advantages apart from the known health benefits, and these benefits are arguably more important than the nobility living for longer. The substance is known to be mind-altering and psychotropic, and thus it gives the person superhuman ability by expanding their minds beyond what is typically conceivable once ingested. The ordinary user develops awareness, hearing, and vision abilities that are greatly beyond those of a naturally occurring human being, in a process that feels like their mind is opening up. Further, the ability to predict the future is the main power granted by spice. This prescience, however, is the holy grail of all the powers that the spice is said to bestow on people. It's not a typical effect and is bestowed only upon specific and chosen individuals. Paul is the embodiment of this phenomenon. It was his godlike talent that elevated him to the role of the story's protagonist, but he had to ingest spice to really experience the true extent of his powers. Beyond just Paul, many of the key functions of society would not be possible without sporadic flashes of clairvoyance and the usage of spice, but more on that later. As mentioned, regular spice usage does turn the person's eyes blue. This is an extremely unique effect, and many filmmakers have attempted to show this phenomenon on screen in their adaptations. The Dune miniseries does an especially good job of adding the glowing blue effect, but here is why this happens. Long-term drug usage turns the user's sclera, cornea, and iris a dark shade of blue known as blue in blue, or the eyes of a bod, which serves as a source of pride for the Fremen and a sign of their shared tribal identity. It appears that this is accomplished by the spice substance somehow saturating and coloring the eye's sclera, cornea, and iris. Given that melange is a mutagen in high dosages, it appears that it is capable of changing the eye color. Additionally, it was said in subsequent novels that the spice itself would glow blue under certain lighting conditions. Therefore, it would appear that the chemical responsible for turning the spice blue literally penetrates into the eye tissue to cause the eyes to become blue. Whatever it may be, it definitely looks quite cool, making the Fremen look quite ethereal.
There's no need to fight over me.
Why is spice so important in the Dune universe? Princess Irulan explains the significance of the spice and why it's the most valuable material in the cosmos in the opening sequence of David Lynch's 1984 film adaptation of the novel Dune. She says that spice is important for space travel. It expands the consciousness and extends life. In fact, in the Dune universe, the one who controls the spice controls the universe. Here's a complete breakdown of why spice is so important in the Dune universe. To understand the value of spice, we have to go 10,000 years before the events of the first Dune novel take place. Before the events of the first Dune novel, a massive war emerged between man and machine, a war that came to be known as the Butlerian Jihad. Man won the war, and subsequently, artificial intelligence and computers were banned throughout the galaxy as a result of widespread anxiety over the possibility that humans would be replaced or enslaved by robots. Now, while they did ban robots and other AI that were modeled on the human mind, the people of the Dune universe realized that they would have to find a substitute to continue to advance their society. They pivoted their focus to advancing and enhancing human talents with the help of spice. Thus, human calculators were intentionally developed, reared, and trained to match the calculating capability required to sustain a highly advanced spacefaring civilization. To achieve a mental state that can compete with those old computers, these people relied on the effects of spice. In order to train pupils to master a variety of physical and mental operations, they created the great schools that we now know as the most influential groups of people in the Imperium. The first school is that of the Bene Gesserit sisters, such as Lady Jessica and the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim. They are revered in a religious manner and hold a lot of sway since they often function as royal truthsayers and are able to have visions of the future. The second school is that of the Mentats, such as Thufir Hawat and Piter de Vries, who are literally human computers and often play the role of royal strategists. Other schools include the Ginaz Swordmasters, such as Duncan Idaho, Sook Doctors, such as Dr. Wellington Yui, and last but not least, we have the Guild Navigators, such as Edric, all hailing from these schools. The Bene Gesserit sisters and the Guild Navigators are the great school members who depend on the spice melange the most, even though some Mentats use it to improve their capacity for logical thinking. Coming specifically to the Bene Gesserit, the spice is extremely important to their profession since it helps enable the Bene Gesserit's psychic revelations, prescient visions, and espionage techniques, since it can unlock the power of the human mind, broadening their mental horizons. Spice also plays an integral role in one of the most important rituals of the Bene Gesserit, the Spice Agony. In this ritual, the water of life, a liquid discharged from the corpse of a drowned sandworm, is a spice substance that is used to mark the transition of Bene Gesserit sisters into Reverend Mothers. The Bene Gesserit sisters are made to ingest the water of life and made to endure the agonizing pain as they work hard to transform the poison within their body into a neutral substance. Once they're able to do so, they are granted access to the other memory, and the process is complete. The other memory is a shared reservoir of genetic consciousness that dates back tens of thousands of years, and the Reverend Mothers are elevated members of the Order who have access to it. Further, even after one becomes a Reverend Mother, they need continued access to spice to be able to utilize their powers to their full extent. Thus, a lot of the wealth of the Bene Gesserit goes into making sure that the spice is constantly flowing and that they have large amounts of it. Without it, they wouldn't be nearly as powerful as they are. Next, we come to the Spacing Guild, the great school responsible for all of the space travel in the Imperium. You might have wondered how they keep traveling from planet to planet with such ease, and well, it's all thanks to spice. Space travel is obviously challenging, and it used to take long periods of time to travel between planets, but the Spacing Guild found a way around it, thus establishing a monopoly that made them extremely rich. After all, any person who wants to be taken seriously in the galaxy must possess the ability to move faster than the speed of light. Their solution to the travel problem was, well, you guessed it, spice. The Spacing Guild settled on guild navigators to carry out their strategy, and these knowledgeable and exceptional individuals consumed large amounts of spice and thus attained the spice's supreme gift, the ability to see into the future, a sort of clairvoyance, and they made use of it to pilot their aircraft through unfathomable circumstances in space. They were essentially able to carry out risk-free travel at speeds faster than light by looking into the future and charting out paths. A spaceship's navigator's primary responsibility is to steer the craft safely across fold space and away from all of its numerous perils. The spacers keep a tight hold on the navigators since, without them, intergalactic travel would be impossible, and one mistake could spell doom. This sun-baked worm ooze keeps the entire galactic civilization together, since everything from trade to travel to combat requires traveling through fold space, and navigators need a lot of spice. As seen in the Dune movie, this calls for frequent, substantial spice consumption, as well as pretty much submerging the navigator in a tank of spice gas since, over time, they morph into fish-like beings and are unable to breathe regular air and have to continuously breathe spice gas. Due to the fact that there is no other means to travel between worlds without spending years, this fact alone makes Melange the most valuable resource in the galaxy. In fact, even the super rich and powerful guild has not been able to find an alternative, and thus all their operations are dependent on a constant supply of spice. Last but not least, we have the Mentats. As said earlier, they are literally human computers, masters of logic, and they use spice to aid in their mental abilities. For in-depth information on Mentats, check out our video on the Twisted Mentat, Piter de Vries. By large, what we can conclude from this is that some of the wealthiest, most influential factions in the Dune universe are entirely dependent on spice for their functions. Further, the rich and noble also want to be able to extend their lifespans so as to extend their period of rule. Thus, spice is integral to the functioning of the Imperium. Considering that people are willing to pay exorbitant amounts of money to be able to purchase spice, he who is in charge of its manufacture is bound to earn in boatloads. It is often said that one briefcase of spice is enough to purchase an entire planet, and that just goes to show just how valuable this substance is. Thus, one of the most intriguing features of Dune's world is definitely spice. It is also one of the main driving forces behind the plot and the various political machinations in Dune. The only thing that cannot change, no matter what happens with respect to its emotional effects or its societal implications, is that the spice must flow. That's all for now, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.